Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
What does it mean to live a life of purpose so deeply that it shapes everything? Your work, your relationships, your worldview, even the way you define love and money. My guest today is Sandy Blackburn, founder of Social Outcomes and Impact Culture Australia, and one of Australia's leading thinkers in social impact and organisational culture. Sandy's story is extraordinary. For 15 years, she lived and worked in South Africa through the last years of apartheid and into the birth of democracy, immersing herself in township life, working alongside activists, marrying into a Black African family, and raising 2 children across cultures. It's a story she captures beautifully in her autobiographical book, Holding Up the Sky, An African Life. In our conversation, Sandy shares the powerful lessons that those years taught her about community, belonging, and Ubuntu, the African philosophy that says, I am because we are. We talk about what Western culture has lost in its obsession with individual freedom and what it might take to rediscover our shared humanity. Sandy also reflects on how those experiences shaped her work today, from leading social innovation at Westpac to founding Social Outcomes and now launching Impact Culture Australia, a bold new venture helping purpose-driven organisations embed impact into their culture and systems. This is a rich, deeply human conversation about love, community, identity, and what really matters in business and in life. Here's my interview with Sandy Blackburn. Sandy, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. We've been skirting around this conversation for a while, so it's going to be interesting to put it in one place.
Oh my God, I'm so electrified about this conversation. I think it's going to be a little bit different. But we will kick off with a question everyone gets, which is, in your view, is there a role for love in business?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why else would you do it? At the end of the day, we think we do it for money. We think we create these careers so that we can be, wealthy and financially stable and all those kind of things. But if you achieve that, then what? If there is no love, then what have you done? Nothing. So it has to be a means to an end, and the end has to be relationship. So whether that's relationship with your family, with your partner, with your friends, with your community, love. With your pets, love. So money is a way to get there. There are many ways to get there, but it is a way to get there. It is a way to buy yourself space to love. So absolutely.
Buy yourself space to love. Ooh.
To love people, but also to love what you do.
Yeah. 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 On so many levels. Love that. Thank you, Sandy. So I want to dive into your background and how it's shaped your identity and what you're doing now.
Yes.
And you were very generous and gave me a copy of your beautiful book, Holding Up the Sky, An African Life, which is an autobiographical book, which tracks an epic journey of yours over 15 years between 1988 and 2003. During some of the most tumultuous times in South Africa's history, which is where the events are based.
Yes.
It's a story of a young Australian woman leaving home and immersing herself in township life in South Africa, and witnessing both deep injustice and tremendous resilience and joy. You also moved from being a visitor to becoming part of a complex set of identities. So a partner in a mixed-race marriage, a mother, an adoptive mother, a contributor to community development, and also someone living between cultures, as much as you did try to immerse yourself. The
there's so much I want to dive into, but I want to look at this through the lens of identity and how it connects you to the work you do. So I'm going to ask you to share elements from the book. And I was going to ask you to just take us through a journey. And I thought, oh my God, it's so epic. We'll be here
Long one.
for like 3 hours. So I've just pulled out a few questions
Hmm.
to help guide this. What first drew you to South Africa?
When I was tiny, like 6 or 7, I don't remember, I announced to my parents that when I grew up, I was going to go and live in Africa. At the time, I didn't understand it was a continent rather than a country. So there were lots of places to choose from. So that South Africa wasn't actually top of my list. I was really interested in East Africa.
Right.
And I think I got that from watching movies and TV shows and things like that. But that felt accessible to me. So I was either going to be a doctor and work in, refugee centers and things like that as a doctor, or I was going to be Jane Goodall type, researcher. So I was interested in biology, so human biology and animal biology. So I thought that would be the way that I would contribute and be part of it and immerse myself.
And that
And
was from when you were very young.
very young. So my parents probably looked down at me and thought, yeah, a little weirdo. But I announced it at that age and said, that's what I'm going to do when I grow up. And they went, yeah, sure. And as I got older, it became clear I was very serious about it. So I went straight from uni. I was offered an opportunity to go to South Africa specifically when I was angling my way towards East Africa. But then I got this opportunity for South Africa.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I can start there and then go up to East Africa, whether it was Kenya or Tanzania or, it was fine. But I would start in South Africa because I had a concrete relationship there through which I could engage. So initially it was a start into a life of service on the continent somewhere, but it very quickly turned into a love affair with the country and the politics and the people, and everything that was going on was so compelling that it made it, after a few years, impossible to think about being anywhere else.
So how old were you when you went there, and what was the invitation that got you there?
I was just finished uni, so 21, 22. Um, I had been seeing someone when I was at uni whose father used to make documentaries in Southern Africa into a number of different countries. A lot of them were for not-for-profit NGOs, that kind of thing. So he was doing all sorts of interesting work, but using his communication skills as an artist and also as a filmmaker. So he knew a whole bunch of people. And we had been doing some work in Sydney that one of the NGOs that he was working with, the CEO came out and then learnt about that work that we were all doing. So my boyfriend and all of us were doing together, and said, you know what would be great? We've got this youth leadership program in South Africa where we are, and you guys could come across and be part of it for a period if that was of interest to you. And so I was, yes. In the time it took to organize that, sadly, I broke up with said boyfriend,
Yep.
and he brought his new girlfriend, and
Yep.
that was really awkward. They are still happily married all these
Oh,
years later.
really?
They
How
live they
lovely.
live like 3 kilometers away from me now,
Oh,
and I visit
wow.
from time to time. Um, but what it meant was that I wasn't hanging out with the other Australians because I didn't want to see my old boyfriend hanging out with his new girlfriend. So I spent all of my free time as well as my working time with my South African colleagues, hearing their stories, understanding their lives, where the Australians were hanging out together, understandably,
Mm.
but I didn't want to be part of that at that point. So it was hard, but it was the avenue that opened up South African life for me because I got to know my South African colleagues really deeply because we were spending so much time together. And at night, the building that we were staying in didn't have electricity. So we would make a fire, put candles around the room, and tell stories about our lives. So I was entranced by the horrified, but also entranced
Mm.
by their stories. And that was the window in. And
So,
that's why I stayed.
so ultimately, the awkwardness of your ex-boyfriend being with a girlfriend was a gift.
It was a gift, as these things often are. At the time, they feel really
Yeah.
hard. And when you look back, you go, no, that was a pivotal moment. It's really important. So, yeah, that's how it worked out.
So Can you give our listeners some context as to that time period in South Africa?
So when a regime is getting to the end of its life and it can feel it's losing control, it gets enormously violent. And that's where we were. So people described it as the last kick of a dying horse, but boy, that horse could kick. So 1988, we were living in a place called Pietermaritzburg, and we were initially, I eventually moved in, but in and out of the townships of Pietermaritzburg, and one of them was called Mbali, which means flower in Zulu. And Mbali was the most dangerous place on the face of the earth at that time in terms of the murder rate. And it was basically political violence of the security police coming in and killing people. So people talk about black on black violence, but what was really happening was state sanctioned violence. And so people were dying all the time. So on weekends, I spent most of my weekends going to funerals, not to weddings, as many of my friends did in their 20s. Like I've never been a bridesmaid, I haven't done all of that because my friends were being murdered, basically. And whenever you went to a funeral, the police would be there and they'd shoot at everyone because it was a group, of black people gathered together, which they found disconcerting. And so there would eventually be some kind of open fire. And we're just there as mourners for the person who had died, weaponless, and we were getting fired on by the police, and someone would get wounded or killed. And so that would mean in a week or so, you'd go to the next funeral and then the next and the next. But even during the week, it was a very violent place to be at nighttime. Daytime, it was fine, but at nighttime, the police would come and whisk people away. So it was.
And you share some of the experiences you had. So, I mean, you were right in the thick of it, and you had some very, very close calls.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I could not tell my parents about at the time.
And I thought mine was bad, hitchhiking around Turkey and things like that, and not telling my mum about that. But this is a whole other level.
This is a whole other level.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in because when I was living in the township and I would go into town for something, you'd use these combis, and they're like a people mover. There's a word for them here, I forget what it is. And it was private transport. So you would pay a small amount and they would shove as many people as possible into the minivan, to the combi van, and go into town. And I would always get selected because I'm still really skinny. And so they would go, well, we can fit you in between other people. So they'd call me out of the line and squish me in. And I remember sitting next to these two big, beautiful African women who I was like really squished next to. And they turned to me and I was probably 25. And they said, does your mother know you're here? And I was like, not quite, not here. Generally here in the country, yes, but not right here. So it was that kind of thing. So you had protest marches in town, you had political movements, things were happening with Mandela being moved out of prison. Well, he was moved off Robben Island into Pollsmoor prison on the mainland. So you could feel these shifts starting to occur. There were negotiations opening up, but night by night on the streets, it was so violent. People were so angry because they were losing privilege and they could feel it. Things were going to change and it wasn't going to be as white supremacist as it had always been, and things were shifting. And because the white community was in the vast majority, that was very disconcerting for the white community. And the white community, I didn't understand before I got there, was very conspicuously kept apart.
Yeah.
From when they talk about apartheid, that's literally what it was. So the white community, the only people they'd ever met who were black and had a conversation with were usually domestic labor. So they didn't have relationships outside that. And so they knew this tiny little narrow window, which was very curated, because if someone's employing you and if you lose that job, you and the 12 people who are depending on your job starve, you're going to say exactly what you need to say to keep that job. Whereas my co-workers were all black. Eventually I was living in the township, so my neighbours were all black, and I was going to parties and church and events and community rallies and workshops and all these things. So the majority of my worldview was black. But that's not how it was for white people. So they were terrified of what was going to come. But I wasn't terrified because my experience of living in the townships was so warm and welcoming. And the African culture is rich and it's like arms wide open. It's like sitting in between those two women and feeling held and contained and loved and joked with. And like it's this warm experience. But white South Africans didn't know that because they were kept apart. So it was really hard.
And a lot of the earlier work you were doing was in actually bringing Black South Africans and white South Africans, young South
Young ones,
Africans,
school age, high school, yeah.
yeah, together to sort of, bridge that gap
Yeah.
and distrust, I guess.
And our hypothesis was if they knew someone personally, it would be much harder to buy into those stereotypes when they could say, but actually, so and so wasn't like that. And when the government or my parents or neighbors or whatever is saying these things, I actually have a proof point that that's not true because I know this person and he's amazing, she's amazing, and it doesn't fit. So we were looking to create some dissonance
Mm.
in what they were told versus what they'd experienced. So we got them to do really hard, unpleasant things together for the weekend, like they'd come on Friday night and they'd leave on Sunday night. And we just made them go through tough stuff, physical labor and that kind of stuff. So they built this rapport with each other from that shared agony of building a crate in the township or whatever it was, making mud brick homes, that kind of thing was
And
hard.
having a common enemy and the people making them do it,
But
like
yeah,
you
us.
guys.
No, we did it with them.
Yes, actually, yes, I remember.
In one of the debriefs, there was a young African guy who said, I have never seen a white woman work like an African man. I was like, that's the highest compliment I've ever heard. But what we also did is so we got them together doing the stuff. And then at some point in the weekend, we took them out in public after they'd had that chance to get to know each other. They were sharing bunk houses together, having meals together, all of that. Then we took them out in public where their black colleagues would, of course, be harassed and abused. And the white kids suddenly huddled around and went, that's not okay. So we gave them that moment of shifting the us and them, where the us became the group that were together, the integrated group that was together, and the them became society. So we just gave them that moment where they could realign themselves around to the people that they'd got to care about in that weekend. So it was all sort of thought through for how can we make the most of 2 and a bit days together to really try and build some bridges and break some stereotypes.
That must have been incredibly rewarding.
It was. It was. And I just hope it wasn't too paternalistic looking back on it now, but it was the best we knew how to do at the time.
Yeah, which is all you can do, right?
Yeah.
So living and working in townships, witnessing violence yourself, as well as the resilience of the people in the townships.
Yeah.
What part of that journey do you think changed your sense of self?
It was understanding how Western cultures bring us up to be rugged individuals. And we think about our rights, we think about everything in the world geared towards me as an individual. And we recognize we're part of a nuclear family, but we are predominantly individuals. And what I learnt over those 15 years is there is another way to look at it. And when you look at what's happening in America at the moment, in my opinion, a lot of it comes from this worship of the individual and my individual freedoms, and that not being balanced or even overtaken by the good of the community around me. And the way that groups in America define who is my neighbor allows them to promote that white supremacy and to give permission to the abuse of people that don't look like them. But what I understood from my experiences in South Africa was thinking about us human beings as a collective is what saves our humanity. And so I don't even buy into the whole patriotism and national pride. Like, it's an accident of birth. And what does it mean anyway? We're people on a planet spinning through the universe, and we're arguing about countries and even states in Australia. The state and taking little sporting teams. I just don't care. And so I learned to think about the collective, because that's the way decisions are made in Africa. They're made through a collective process. They're made with a collective view in mind. So the individual is not forgotten, but the individual is cared for in the context of community. And so I was taught that lesson very deeply, and it changed everything for me. And so I just see things so differently to my peers back in Australia. And it all comes down to that, the collective versus the individual freedom.
It's such an interesting point. I've just come from 3 days at Glenworth Valley for B Corp assembly. So, a retreat for the B Corp community. And there were some incredible sessions there. But in one of them, First Nation speaker was talking about so eloquently about how First Nations people have connection to nature, to place, and to
Yeah.
community. And that is what brings them together. And she said exactly that, that somewhere along the way in Western cultures, we've lost that. And she posed a question which was really interesting and is one, that's got me thinking. And that was, at what point in your cultural history was your connection to community and place decolonized? And it's the same thing that you're talking about, is
Yeah.
it's like we've taken that fork in the
Yeah.
road, and self-worth is above everything else.
Yeah. And everything can be sacrificed on that altar of your individual freedoms. And that's the way to bring about the end of human civilization, in my opinion. It's
Yeah.
really dangerous stuff because it allows for this rampant capitalism. It allows for white supremacy. It allows for, and particularly where you've got the intersectionality of Black women bearing the brunt of all of these systems of oppression for no reason whatsoever. And my experience in South Africa was particularly geared around Black women and particularly Black older women. And for me, there's a sense of home in that group of humans that I've not experienced in another context. And so to think that Black older women bear the brunt of our societal prejudice and discrimination and brutality is abhorrent, because those are the people that I found most accepting of me as a young white woman, most nurturing, most protecting, most accepting, most giving in terms of their wisdom and their perspective and so on. So that felt like home. And they bear the brunt of these systems that we've put into place, which are artificial and not who we really are as human beings.
Yeah.
So watching, Palestine play out, watching what's happening in Sudan and Uganda is horrific, because we cease to understand the value of human life. We cease to understand the value of living in community with each other. We're just interested in ripping resources off each other. This whole class divide, billionaires versus the rest of us, the top 1%, think that if they rip wealth out of the majority of the population, they'll somehow be happy
Yeah.
and find connection or love or just security. Are they thinking that that keeps them safe from pain? It does not.
No.
And so it's all backwards. It's all backwards. And if we could right size around understanding that community is at the heart of who we are, and there's a word that people have heard called Ubuntu, which means humanity, but what it literally means, because you know how a word in one language doesn't translate perfectly into another, you need like 20 words to explain a thing. So Ubuntu is very much, I am only human through my interaction with you. So in isolation, in my personal freedoms, in my individuality, my humanity is actually lost, according to that concept.
Yeah.
It's on pause. I don't have it. If I'm not in relationship, and here in Australia, people would say, First Nations people would say, with country and with community.
Yeah.
But certainly in Africa, you talk about in relationship with community, less so land,
Yeah.
but very much community. If I'm not in relationship with others, my humanity is invisible. And I don't think we understand that in Western culture. That was the most profound influence of my time there, that shaped everything they did, the way they did everything. And the warmth that you experience is a function of that fundamental understanding of what makes us human.
Relationships.
Yep.
Yeah. Now you didn't just immerse yourself in township life as part of a project. You married, is it Toboho?
Tiboho, yeah.
Toboho.
Yeah.
You married, so you became a mixed race family.
Yeah.
You adopted a child. You had your own child,
Yeah.
and you embraced the culture. It really struck me how strongly you tried to embrace that culture. Like you really put yourself in there.
Yeah.
How I don't know how to phrase this question, but how did you navigate? I mean, you came from a white middle class Australian background, Anglo-Australian background.
Yeah.
How did you navigate identity, belonging, and difference?
Firstly, I came from a very working class background.
Yep.
And so we didn't have a lot growing up. But again, didn't matter. We had enough.
Yep.
To our earlier conversation about what is enough and what this kind of work teaches you. I always been immersive, if you like. So when I went to primary school, we had what then was called an opportunity deaf class, OD class. And so there were kids with with hearing impediments who were streamed a little bit into their classes to make sure that the education they were receiving was appropriate for the communication styles that they needed. But other than that, they were completely integrated into the school. So my first response was to learn how to sign as a little kid.
All right.
Because that just seemed obvious, right? So my mother, I don't remember a lot of this, but my mum tells me stories about how I was always like that. Even in preschool, when I'd go, like before school, I'd go to childcare, I was like that. And so I was always interested in people's difference and, you know, how people were navigating the world if they'd come from another culture or if they had a different way of sensing the world or whatever it might be. That was always interesting to me. It made someone more fascinating. And so anything that wasn't something I was used to was something I was drawn to understand, to enjoy, to participate. It had always been like that. So it's really not very surprising that I went to live in another culture and then wanted to learn the language. The funny thing was I was living in KwaZulu-Natal, so I had to learn how to speak Zulu, and I got good at it because I was living in the townships. And then when I married Te Roho, he speaks Sutu and Tswana, and that's on the far end of the spectrum of 9 African languages that exist in South Africa.
Wow.
So I had to start all over again. So I was happier down the Zulu Xhosa end of the spectrum that has a particular structure, a particular rhythm. There's some overlap in the words. You can kind of work your way around. And I got good at that. And then I had to start again when we moved just to the other side of Soweto to live, which people found really funny. And they would just tease me mercilessly about things like that. Because when you're in a place like Soweto, it's really, really cosmopolitan. And people will take languages and thread them through a conversation like an art form. So in any sentence, someone might use 5 different languages.
Wow.
And people like it.
Yeah.
And so you're playful with language and meaning and that kind of stuff. And so you had to just learn or die. Like, I'm a social person. I'm a bit of an extrovert. And so I could either learn languages or I could have no one to talk to. And it's not that people didn't speak English, but the people I was hanging around with went, you need to learn. And we're not going to all adjust for you just because you're white. So learn. So it was fantastic in that way. They didn't want to cut me slack to the white kid.
Yeah.
But they really had expectations of me that culturally and linguistically I would participate.
Yeah.
And so I did. And it was amazing. And it was really hard as well. Like, at the end of the day, it's very tiring to work in other languages. And at the end of the day, you're really tired, mentally tired from that. And some days you just want to, watch some English TV or whatever at the end of the day. But it's richer because when you learn language, you learn culture. And so you can't strip those two apart from each other. So the best way to integrate into a culture is to learn the language. And I learned from kids, basically, because they don't mind teaching you anything. They won't laugh at you when you try to say the same thing 10 times. And the vocabulary is a bit smaller, and they've got games and songs, so you can hear the patterns. And so I learned all of the languages that I've spoken through playing with kids on the streets. So that was
amazing.
That was my sneaky cheat sheet approach to language learning.
And it seems to me you just went all in. There was nothing you seemed to hold back. Did you have a sense of throwing yourself into it fully?
No, I was just there.
Yeah.
And when you're there, you show up. Wherever you are, you show up. And that's where I was. What I was very aware of was that of my white privilege, that I could leave whenever I wanted because I had an Australian passport.
Yeah.
That was the thing I was acutely aware of. So for my friends whose lives were under threat because they were young Black activists, they didn't have the option to check out, and I did. So that was a very conscious thing to say, I need to stay in a situation that feels a bit scary because I'm not prepared to use that white privilege card and get out of here if they can't. If they can't, I can't.
Yeah.
Because again, it was about relationship. So how do I honor and respect them in what they're willing to do? Because they could have just laid low and not worked in the anti-apartheid movement, but it wasn't what they felt was right.
Yeah.
And so I felt if that's the price that they're willing to pay, I don't get to be in relationship with them if I don't match that somehow. And I could never match it in the way they played it out because there was much more high stakes for them. The
And you
least I
lost some
could do,
friends as well, didn't
a
you?
lot of friends, the
Yeah.
least I could do was stay and bear witness to it and say, yes, I was there, that happened. Because a lot of what happens in these kind of situations is the government would try to white ant you and gaslight you and say, no, that didn't happen. That's not what happened. And so to have someone with you, regardless of the color of some skin, to have someone with you can say, that happened. I saw it. I was there, is sometimes the only thing you can do. So people ask me that a lot. Why don't you just leave? It was really dangerous because my friends couldn't. So why did I have that right and they didn't? So until they did, I felt like if they would show up, I would show up.
Yeah.
Enjoying the podcast? If you're looking for more inspiration, head to our website, thecauseeffects.com.au, for more resources on how you can start using your business as a force for good. Or buy the For Love and Money book. Every copy sold allows us to protect 1 square metre of rainforest.
And I mean, 15 years is a long time to spend in a country.
Yeah.
What did you think it would be forever, or were you just living in the moment?
A little bit. Like I was living a few years ahead, I suppose, but I wasn't thinking about old age.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking, will I retire here? And I wasn't going that far ahead. So I was in it for the long haul. I didn't know what that would look like, but that's where I'd made my home. And I would visit Australia, obviously, to go and see my parents. My parents would come out and see me. But Australia didn't hold, like it didn't draw me back. I wasn't pining away for being back in that place I grew up in because South Africa was so much more interesting. I felt it's a place where you feel incredibly alive, is all I can say. And when I finally did come back to Australia, I found it really hard. I had no culture shock on the way in. I had terrible culture shock on the way back.
Really?
It
Yeah.
took me about 5 years to find my way
Yeah.
back in Australia because it felt very vanilla
Yes, I can
compared to
imagine.
this richness of every experience. I had a rich political experience. I had a rich social experience. I had a rich work experience. Everything felt rich and full color, full blown. And then I came back to Australia and it was very surface level and very vanilla. So it was such a struggle.
So beyond that, the 5 years of adapting,
Yeah.
how did your experiences in South Africa change the way you viewed the world and your role in it?
The thing I learned in South Africa was how much is enough materially, how much is enough. I was surrounded by people who didn't have a lot, but were okay with that. Yeah, if they'd been offered more, they would have taken it, but they had rich lives they were living. And I'm not saying this thing of, poor people are happy, and it's not like that. They managed to bring a richness into the quality of their lives within the resources that they had available to them. If they'd have had more resources, they would have still done that same thing, but they worked with what they had to create richness. And so when I came back to Australia and I ended up working in corporate for 10 years, I was surrounded by people who didn't know how much was enough. They didn't know how to create that richness with what they had. And so I'd already been taught that. And so that frees you up to do the things that actually matter because you're not chasing the next bonus, the next paycheck, the next car or boat or, I remember I used to catch the bus into work and some people were saying to me, it's very, I don't think they said these words, but low class. That's not very classy of you. You should drive and get parking. I was like, why? So the way that I was taught in South Africa to find a rich life that wasn't linked to just materiality, material possessions and how much money was in the bank and what clothing labels I wore and what shoes I had and what car I drove. my worth was in my humanity. My worth was in my relationships with others, the kind of person I was. Did I care about the people around me? And so I was one of those weirdos in corporate that actually cared about the people I was working with and didn't play the career games. So I used to regularly commit career suicide, and I could have gone up the ranks, but I would have been doing work I didn't care about. And I cared much more about the content of the work I was doing in leadership and culture and ultimately social change community. I was head of social innovation, was the last role I had before I left corporate. So how do you bring the people inside corporate and the resources and the systems and all of those things to bear on social issues? That was far more interesting than becoming a general manager or whatever it was, because I was taught in South Africa to make a rich life without the trappings of these other things. But I saw people really struggle. And I used to be this like secret agony aunt in one of my corporate roles where all the senior guys would come and say, "Can we have a coffee?" And then they'd sit down with you and say, "What's this for? Like, I'm now, really well off, really. And I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Can you help me find some meaning by perhaps helping me with a board role, or are there opportunities to get involved in projects or what?" It just feels quite hollow. But they were very well established, well respected professionals who would secretly say to me, "I'm not sure what it all means." And they thought somehow I knew, and I could help them tap into something that they perhaps thought I had, which was this connection to meaning. So I could see it and go, it's not as good as it looks on the outside, particularly for young people coming up that corporate ladder. They look at those guys, and it was mostly guys, and they would say, wow, they've got everything. They're really established, they're really well regarded, all of those things, really powerful in the organization. I want to be like that. And those guys were saying to me, I'm not sure what it's about.
I mean, we all know, don't we, what, the corporate ladder, the social ladder, you aspire to the next thing above you. You get it for 5 minutes, you're happy, and then you're setting your sights on the next thing because you're comparing yourself to others who've got more.
Yes.
And that never brings that sense of fulfillment.
It really doesn't. And so I saw people not compare themselves in South Africa. They weren't comparing themselves. They were thinking about how they were building a life with what they had, with the people around them, with the opportunities to be happy. Because what was so interesting is Black people often lived their working hours in white worlds, and they had to put the mask on and be the polite, domestic worker or gardener or, whatever it was, teacher, white world. So they had a white world mask. But come 5 o'clock, when everyone started pouring back into the townships, the white world mask came off and the person underneath came out. And it's probably a little bit glamorized in my head, but it feels like that's when the party started. And so there'd be music and people were always moving in a way that looked like dancing. So they'd be walking down the street in this way that was like, I'm back home, I'm safe. And so they'd yell out to people across the street over traffic and greet and chat. And there was this living out loud thing, which is partly about transparency, about I am who I am, what you see is what you get kind of ethos in the culture. But also this idea, I'm home, I'm safe, I'm amongst people that won't murder me. And so I'm going to enjoy these hours that I have before I go back and put the mask on and go into the white world again. And so that was my favorite time of day, like between 5 and 6, before everyone goes home and starts making dinner, and people was on the streets enjoying each other's company. Even if it just meant walking down the street and greeting the neighbors, didn't matter. There was something about that golden hour for me, which was my favorite time of the day.
That's
and we
beautiful.
don't know that here. We don't know that.
No, we know it when we're younger,
Mm.
but we grow out of it, don't we?
We grow out of it. And so I live in the inner west in Sydney, and it has a little bit of that. It allows you to be your authentic self here more than in other parts of the city, I think, in my experience. And so that's why I live here, because I want that authenticity, that freedom to be who you are. And it is a little bit community minded, which I really like. And so I do bump into people I know all day when I'm out walking, all day, in the morning and in the evening when I'm out walking, walk the dog, bump into people, have a chat, say hi, and it's a little like that. It's a shadow of that.
And yet we look for it, don't we? We try to find it, like the whole relationship with alcohol that many people have
Yeah.
is about, lifting their inhibitions.
Yeah. Taking the mask off so that they can engage, when actually you can just engage.
Yeah.
Because the alcohol numbs you.
Yeah.
It doesn't open you up. It just numbs you.
Yeah.
And so I've never been a drinker.
No.
Because I didn't feel I needed it. So when I was in social situations, I was enjoying the people I was around. I didn't feel like I needed to perform or, loosen up or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's just me. That's the way my body works. I don't need it. But you're right, in terms of the way people use alcohol and social drugs and things like that. And all the props we need, because we've lost the skill set of knowing how to be in community with others and even with ourselves, really.
Yeah, because it does come back to your relationship with yourself, not in an individualistic way, but as you say, Ubuntu.
Yeah. And I hear stories now of older women who are setting up little communities to retire into, which I really like. And this idea, if you have like some smaller homes that share a garden or share a kitchen or, have the opportunity to share some living space or have your own private space, and this idea of moving in and out of community at any point in the day, like that's how we should be living.
Yeah.
So I really like it that women are starting to go down that road.
Yeah. Yeah.
And say, well, why don't we, particularly with housing prices as they are, why don't we do that? And particularly, again, because women live longer than their partners, they're often by themselves. And so giving ourselves permission to be in community in a way that we're not culturally familiar with and building new models, I think that's really important.
Let's bring this back to present day. Can you share a little bit about what you're doing now with social outcomes?
Yeah. So not shockingly, still working in social impact work.
I would be so disappointed if you weren't.
Right? So one of the things I realized after working for some years in South Africa was you burn out at the client face, at the coal face. And so I moved from doing the community organizing and all that kind of stuff to taking a step back into supporting the organizations that did that work. So by the time I left South Africa, I'd been working for quite a while in culture, in how to build organizational culture. And so the work I've ended up doing in Australia when I kind of found my mojo again is very much that. So I think at heart, I'm probably a teacher because what makes me really happy is to see people develop, organizations, cultures improve, more clarity in the way they're doing things and how they're doing it that is people-centric, that brings the best out in people in order that they can serve other people. All of that kind of stuff, that's what really floats my boat. And so social outcomes, so I've got 2 companies now. So one is social outcomes where it's really about saying, how can we articulate and communicate and measure our impact? And that's where the sector has been moving for the last decade or so, is really coming to grips with that. And about 6 months ago, I opened up a new for-purpose enterprise, which is called Impact Culture Australia. And that's like the next step. So once we can start to articulate our impact in a way that's meaningful, in a way that provides clarity through conversation, not through getting AI to do that work for you, but having deep conversations inside the organizations with your board, with your funders, with stakeholders, with your clients, all of that, to really work out what is at the heart of the impact you're trying to create. And then how do you take that work of social outcomes, how do you take that impact work, and how do you embed it right through the organization culturally, so that it shows up in all the systems and processes that we have inside organizations. And so Impact Culture Australia is the next challenge that we as a sector will face, will be that integration. And the work I did starting in South Africa and then continuing through when I returned to Australia is really understanding what are cultural levers and how they work and how you can use them artfully to create great places for people to work where they do their best work for others. So that's what this new venture is about, is really thinking about how we build the capacity of the sector to do some cultural work, which will make those organisations more impactful, make them better places to work, etc.
So which organisations are we talking about? Are we talking about for-profit or non-profit or across?
For purpose. So
For
for purpose
purpose.
organisations. I'm agnostic to legal structure,
Yep.
but organisations for whom purpose is the reason that they exist.
Yep.
So they will need to be financially sustainable and all of those things. So it's not that they're not for profit, but they are for purpose, as opposed to there's a bunch of corporates that exist for shareholder value, right? And they wouldn't have purpose at the core. They could, should they wish, put
Yep.
their customers at the center of what they do. They would be more successful if they did. But
Yes.
they're primarily driven by shareholder value, as we know. And so it's not so much that, but organizations that could be for profit, but are for purpose at their core. This is who this new work is for. So helping them to learn and grapple and practice using those cultural levers to create better, more impactful organizations right through the organizational systems and processes, not just at that first level of, can I articulate my impact? Am I measuring my impact? Am I communicating that?
Yep.
That can happen almost at an executive level without sort of washing down in the day-to-day work of the rest of the team. So Impact Culture Australia is to do that work. Social outcomes is to articulate it in the first place.
Yep.
Measure it and communicate it.
Yep.
And Impact Culture Australia is to deepen that.
And so how do you do that? Do you work one-on-one with organisations, or do you have a methodology clearly? But
we've got a methodology that would allow organisations to self-assess where they are against 18 different domains.
Yep.
And get a tailored work plan for how they could improve in each of those areas with resources they can apply, but also if they wanted support, they can contract people to do work. Sometimes that's a social outcomes program. Other times it's, we've got a bunch of other development partners that offer all sorts of other interesting pieces around how to embed impact in a particular area of the organisation. So I've curated a list of development partners that are linked to those organizational domains. So if it's governance, for example, there's opportunities to do something with organizations who are particularly focused on governance and impact, that kind of thing. So it's a mix of things, but ultimately what I want is a tool that's accessible, that's not expensive for the sector to engage with.
Yep.
We've also got a workshop where we explain face-to-face how you work with culture in more detail. So it's a one-day thing. But really, organizations could do a lot of it off their own bat. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't a burden on them financially to do that work. Because my gut feeling is, in the same way we've seen that organizations who can articulate, measure, and communicate their impact are now receiving more funding. So I've seen that in our work with social outcomes, but I was also checking in with a fundraising entity, one of the leading ones in the country, and they said, absolutely, our data says that that's true.
Yep.
The more organizations can, from evidence, communicate their impact, the more funding they're receiving. So that's for now. But I think funders are going to say, okay, that looks good. Is there depth to that? So the next question will be, how embedded is that in your culture? So I think we'll have a period of time where just communicating our impact like that externally is enough to attract funding. But the next frontier will be, can you prove that it's in your organizational culture? So as I said, organizations can do some of that work themselves by using the tool.
Yep.
But they can also get us to run the workshop with the team to really build that capability of how do you think about the art of culture, the art of all the levers that are at your disposal. So I learnt that in South Africa. I learnt that organizationally because we were working with a lot of government departments who had gone from being run by old white men, basically, and now they had a whole new team coming in post the 1994 elections who were young and Black and often female. And so everything was changing. So the makeup of the public service was changing. The purpose of the public service used to be to service the needs of the white community and to keep the Black community at bay. And post-apartheid, it was how do we service the needs of our whole population, not just one racial group.
Yeah.
Everything had to change, all the systems, the processes, everything had to change. So I was taught how to do that work in the most extreme circumstances and how to have real impact for those members of the community that have been excluded in the past. But not only your client base changed, but your boss also changed. And now we were going from working in 1 or 2 languages to 11. So how do you cope with that cultural complexity in a very short period of time? Because the community were expecting that the ANC government would bring about change quickly, but it needed its public service to make that adjustment as quickly as possible to facilitate that.
Yeah.
It was an enormous challenge. We did a little bit of work in corporate, but mostly it was government because that's where change was happening primarily. And so to be taught how to do that in that tinderbox of change was another gift that I was given professionally. So I was given Ubuntu personally as a gift, and I was given this work professionally as a gift. And so it's from that I'm bringing that culture work now that I think the sector will be ready for it and really help bring clarity and consistency right through those organizational drivers, make the sector a better place to work, but make us more impactful from a cultural perspective.
And I imagine the very fact that it's cultural work is it's taking you right back into the territory of relationships with others, interconnectedness.
Yes. And if you could do one thing in an organization, it would be to bring clarity and clarity of, what am I to do here? What are we doing? What are we aiming for? How does this work with that? Like clarity is the thing that you want to drive all the way through the organization. And clarity is as good for organizations as it is for people.
Yeah.
Having clarity in your relationships is incredibly important. And to be able to understand each other, speak clearly, say what it is you mean, have clarity about expectations, all of that stuff. Like we know from the interpersonal stuff that clarity is everything. So how do we bring clarity and consistency through all of the systems and the interactions that we have organizationally? It's not easy, but it can be done once you've got a framework for it.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that I was taught and saw played out while I was there. So I think we're ready for that.
Absolutely. And so you're launching, you said soft launch end of this year?
Soft launch in December, so a few short weeks away. And then the more public launch will be at the end of January when everyone's back from leave. And we'll launch Impact Culture Australia then.
So if anyone listening to this is interested in learning more, how should they get in touch with you?
We're doing a holding page website, which should be up in a few weeks. But in the meantime, just come to me through Social Outcomes. We've got a contact us page there.
Okay, and we will when it's live, we'll connect that link to the show notes as well, so people can go straight there. That's exciting.
It's very exciting.
How long has it been in development? It's been a big piece of work, I believe.
It's been years in development, and I took the summer off to just document everything, to get a first draft of everything on paper, and since then I've been building that up until today.
So can I ask, because you were working with social outcomes, what was the thing that actually drove you to go in with this? What did you see? What were you frustrated with?
Not so much that. I always knew I would do it, but we weren't ready.
Right. Okay.
And so even the team at Social Outcomes would say to me, I really want to get into the culture work. I think that's what's important. And they were saying, I don't have any framework for that. Is it something that you can upskill us on? And I just didn't feel like as a sector we were there.
Yeah.
But in the last year or two, and not longer than that, we've seen the sector really engage with impact in a way that we haven't 5 years ago. And so that's what I was waiting for, because otherwise it would have been too much too soon.
Yeah.
So I've been sitting on this for a long time.
Yeah.
Waiting until the sector has this level of appetite. And so this Impact Culture Australia is for the ambitious ones. It's for the ones that want to jump over the horizon first.
Yeah.
The ones that can see around corners and say, I can see that this is coming. And we want to be there as soon as possible and really make sure that our organisation is future-proof. So it's really for the ambitious organisations who want to do that extra work to be as impactful as they can possibly be. And there are tons of them.
Brilliant.
So it's time. We're ready.
Yes. So Social Outcomes and Impact Culture Australia is for purpose, but also not-for-profit
Yes.
organization. So you balance profit and purpose.
Yes.
How do you, like you talked before about how much is enough?
Yes.
And when you look at purpose, impact, and profit,
Yeah.
like how do you navigate the balancing act of the two?
So the team is very carefully chosen, but like calls to like. And so I think when you get to a certain age, you say, I need to be paid enough to wash my own face, as you'd say, to make sure I can pay the bills and things like that. But I want to be doing work that is meaningful, that makes me feel good about getting up in the morning. But I need to do it in a way that balances my responsibilities and also my desire to have a life. And so everyone in the team has care responsibilities of some description. It could be everyone's kids are grown, but it could be grandchildren, it could be parents. So they've got some caring responsibilities. So we are ultimately flexible. Everyone works their own hours. But people also like to travel and go to retreats and things like that. So people manage their own time such that they prioritize the things that are important to them. Now that includes work, but it's not only work.
Yeah.
And so there'll be people take time off to travel for, 3 or 4 weeks, or they might say, I'm moving my parents from here to there, so I'm going to need a few weeks. I won't be on projects for a bit. And so everyone is responsible for, if they sign up for a project and say, yeah, I'm interested in that one, that they will manage that commitment, but they're also free to manage their lives in the same way. So we don't clock watch, we don't do any of that. Obviously we have timesheets, but there's no, you work when you want. As long as you can deliver a quality project or quality deliverables for our clients, you can do it around whatever other, other commitments that you have or just want. So we've all got to a point in our careers. I think the least experience on the team is 3 decades.
Yeah.
Wow. And the
Wow.
highest level of experience is 5 decades. So everyone is incredibly experienced practitioners in this work. We've all done it. So we can all then coach other people on how to do it and avoid all the rabbit holes that we all fell down into and tripped and broke a leg on.
And does it work?
Yeah,
it's fully flexible model.
it does. It
Love
does.
it.
It's obviously got its challenges.
Yeah.
Because if someone's away, other people might have to backfill on a project, things like that. But there's a lot of respect in the team. So we know that we would do it for the other person. And there'll be times where maybe someone's sick, having an operation or whatever it might be. So there's that flexibility around your commitments and your interests, but also that flexibility around creating space for other people to respond to that. So there's give and take. And I think it has to be built on a lot of trust and respect that you have for the other people on the team. And so we work on that quite a lot to make sure that that is still full. And it's not easy. It has its challenges and it has its highs and lows. But you have to keep coming back and talking and having those hard conversations if it has broken down in any way, shape, or form on a project or whatever it might be. So it takes work, like a marriage. It takes work, but it's worth putting the work in because it creates an environment that we get to work in a way that we all really value.
And
So
I imagine it strengthens relationships within the organization
it does.
because you want to make it work. So
Yes.
you want to make sure that you're covering the person when they need that cover and
Yes. Because you know they'll cover you.
yeah.
And so it's a little bit Ubuntu-ish, really.
Yeah, that's what I
It's
was
about saying,
thinking.
how do we meet the needs of us as a community of practitioners, as a community of workers, by not centering our own needs first and foremost every single time. There'll be times when we're going to do that and times when we'll center the needs of others.
Yeah.
And there's give and take in that. It's not perfect, but as a general model, I think it works.
So I love that. I love that model, and I think it's fascinating. And I think there's so much that other organizations can learn from. And obviously, a whole younger generation coming up are yearning for that kind of accountable, trust me to be accountable, and I will do the work, that kind of model.
Yeah. And you're not going to earn millions
Yeah.
doing it this way, but your life is richer.
Yeah.
It's the same theme. So what do you value?
Yeah.
So do you have enough to get by and pay the mortgage and all of those kind of things, but get to live this flexible life where you're doing work that matters to you, So you might take a discount for that, for the flexibility, but it's worth it. And that's what I think the generations behind me are responding to, but also to know if you shift the model of how we do business, it's possible. And you don't have to wait till you retire to be able to do the things you want to do. You can do them now. It will cost you, but it's worth paying, because that ideal of chasing, you know, the big money doesn't really lead you anywhere in the end. So better to know you can have enough of a life financially to have a rich life on all fronts.
Love
and not
that.
to trade away your freedom for money.
I love that. I love that. We're going to have to close now. I think, oh gosh, we're over time already. I knew this, we would be, going down some really extraordinary rabbit holes. I was going to say 5 years, 3 years from now, where would you hope social outcomes and Impact Culture Australia would be?
Just continuing to deepen the impact capability of the sector. That's all I really care about.
Yeah.
And if when I retire, I feel like it's moved and I've had a small part to play in that, I'm done. I'm happy. That's enough for me.
That's enough.
It's enough.
I love that clarity that you know that. I love that.
Yeah. I'm very clear on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sandy, thank you so much
Thanks,
for
Karen.
having this conversation with me. Is your book, I don't know if you can see it. Oh no, I've got the thing on so you can't see it, but it's a
There it is.
beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you. It won an award that had nothing to do with me for its design.
I
Because
I
it's so
love it.
beautiful.
That's you on the front and
That is me
your
on the front.
son, isn't it?
No, it's my friend's grandchild.
Oh,
So
okay.
the kids were a little bit pissy with me about that. Well, I couldn't, but you don't get to choose the cover. So I
Yeah.
gave them a whole lot of photos and they went, this is the photo.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
happens to be my friend's granddaughter.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, but it's
beautiful.
gorgeous.
Can
So it's
people,
around as an ebook.
yeah.
It's not actively in bookshops as a new book. You can see it at secondhand bookshops and things like that, but I wrote it years ago.
Yeah.
But it's still, I believe, around as an ebook.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So listeners, you can get it as an ebook. And if you would like to get in touch with Sandy, we'll have that link to find out more about what the initiative you've talked about. But just to get in touch directly with you, what would be the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, just send me an email on the social outcomes page. That comes directly through to me.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you
the
for
best
having
with
me.
your launch.
Thank you.
And
I
I
hope you'll
look,
be there.
oh yeah, just tell me when and where, and I
All
will
right,
be
excellent.
there 100%.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing how it's going for you in 2026.
Thanks, Carolyn. Hopefully well.
Very well.
Hopefully. And for you too.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?